My sister-in-law laughed as she stuck me at the worst table, thinking she had one. Then the bill came, and suddenly, the joke wasn't so funny. I took a sip of my bourbon, smiled, and watched her world crash down. I sat there, swirling a glass of top-shelf bourbon, watching them all laugh, like I wasn't even in the room. Like I wasn't the one paying for this entire goddamn party. But that was the thing, wasn't it? They never really saw me. Not as family. Not as one of them. "Reed, we need to talk," came a sickly sweet voice, dripping with fake sympathy. I already knew who it was before I looked up. Vanessa, my sister-in-law, self-appointed queen of the family. The kind of woman who spoke in smiles, but carried a dagger behind her back. I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "Do we, though?" She placed a perfectly manicured hand on my arm, like we were about to have a deep, heartfelt moment. Like she wasn't about to pull some petty, backhanded bullshit. "It's about the seating arrangements," she said with a saccharine smile. "Just a tiny change." I exhaled through my nose. "What change?" She gave me one of those fake, "I'm so sorry but not really" pouts. "You'll be at table 17 instead of the main table. It just makes more sense that way." I blinked. "Table 17? You mean the one in the back? By the bathrooms?" She let out a little laugh. "Oh, don't make it sound so bad. It's still a great seat." I set my glass down slowly. "Vanessa, I organized this party. I paid for this party. And you're telling me I don't get to sit at the table with my own wife?" She tilted her head, looking so pleased with herself. "Reed, it's just, well, it's the family table." I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. "I'm literally married to Blair." "Exactly," she said, as if that somehow proved her point. "Blair's family. You're—" She waved a hand in the air, dismissively. "Here, of course." I stared at her for a long moment. Did Delilah approve this? I asked, referring to my mother-in-law, the only person in Blair's family who had ever truly welcomed me. For the first time, Vanessa hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. "Delilah is too busy enjoying her night to worry about seating charts," she said smoothly. "So I took care of it. You understand." Oh, I understood. Perfectly. Before I could say another word, a waiter hesitated beside me. "Mr. Calloway," he said carefully. "Just confirming the additional orders. Truffle risotto, caviar tasting, the vintage Cristal. Mrs. Vanessa said you approved them." I turned my head so slowly, I swear I could hear my own neck crack. "I did what?" Vanessa took a sip of her champagne, completely unbothered. "Oh, relax, Reed. It's a celebration. You wouldn't want Delilah to feel restricted, would you?" I stared at her, feeling the bourbon burn a little hotter in my throat. This wasn't about the food, or the seating, or even the party. This was about control, about reminding me that in her version of this family, I was just a guest. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my banking app, and tapped the restaurant tab. Then I did something I knew Vanessa would never expect. I left it completely open. No limits. No restrictions. "You know what?" I said, looking her dead in the eyes. "You're right." Her smirk widened. "Finally, you're seeing reason." I smiled back. "Go crazy, Vanessa." I patted her shoulder. "Really? Order whatever you want." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you playing at?" I finished my drink, set the glass down with a quiet clink, and stood. "Nothing." And then I walked away. She thought she had won. By the end of the night, she'd be the one paying for it. The moment I walked away, I could feel Vanessa's eyes burning into my back. She was trying to figure out what my game was, probably already planning whatever petty little move she thought would put me in my place. Let her. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I headed straight for Blair, who was laughing with Delilah near the head table. The second Delilah spotted me, her face lit up. "Reed, darling, come here." She reached for my hand, squeezing it warmly. "I was just telling Blair how perfect everything is tonight. You really outdid yourself." I smiled, the tightness in my chest loosening just a bit. "Anything for you, Delilah." Blair turned toward me, her brows knitting together. "Hey, where have you been? You look—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Like he's been dealing with Vanessa," Delilah finished, rolling her eyes. Blair groaned. What did she do this time? I forced a smile. Nothing I can't handle. Delilah sighed, rubbing her temples. I swear, that girl thrives on making everyone miserable. You know, she actually tried to tell me I should sit at the second table because, and I quote, the younger generation should take the spotlight. Blair's jaw dropped. She what? I let out a low chuckle. Yeah, well, apparently I'm sitting at table 17 near the bathrooms. Blair's expression darkened. Oh no, don't worry about it, I said, sipping my drink. Vanessa thinks she's running the show. Let's see how she handles it when the curtain falls. And right on cue, Vanessa's voice rang out over the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? I turned to see her standing near the stage, one hand wrapped around a champagne flute, the other gesturing grandly. The woman had an uncanny ability to command a room. But tonight, she was about to choke on her own spotlight. I just want to take a moment to say how grateful we all are for our wonderful mother, Delilah, she continued, smiling like she hadn't just spent the last hour treating me like garbage. She's the heart and soul of this family, and we are so blessed to celebrate her tonight. Polite applause followed. I clapped along, watching her like a predator watches its prey. Vanessa turned slightly, her smirk widening. And of course, none of this would have been possible without my dear sister Blair. She motioned toward my wife, completely skipping over me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few people glanced in my direction. Delilah sat up straighter. Vanessa, she said, her tone sharp. Reed planned and paid for this event. Vanessa let out a soft laugh, pretending not to hear. And of course, we all chipped in a little here and there to make this magical. I smiled to myself. Oh, this was going to be fun. The waiter from earlier stepped onto the stage, carrying a sleek black folder. He tapped Vanessa on the shoulder, leaning in to whisper something. She frowned. What? The waiter gestured toward me. The bill, ma'am. Mr. Calloway instructed us to bring it directly to the person who placed the additional orders. Vanessa's smile twitched. Excuse me. The waiter politely held out the folder. The total, including the truffle risotto, caviar, and vintage champagne, comes to $22,000. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork. Vanessa's face went pale. That's impossible. The waiter remained expressionless. Would you like to put all on one card, or split the payment? I crossed my arms, tilting my head. Yeah, Vanessa. How would you like to pay? Her head snapped toward me, her nostrils flaring. You're unbelievable. I cut in, raising a finger. Language. Family event, remember? Delilah's eyes darted between us. Reed, what's going on? I gave her an easy smile. Vanessa decided to treat herself tonight. Ordered all the most expensive dishes and drinks without asking me. I turned back to my sister-in-law, my voice smooth as silk. And since she wanted to act like she's in charge, I figured she'd also want to handle the bill. Vanessa's hands were shaking. I'm not paying that. This is your event. I shrugged. Well, you did tell me to relax and let the family enjoy themselves, so I did. The waiter cleared his throat. Ma'am, if you can't pay, we'll have to involve management. And if the bill remains unpaid, we'll need to. Before he could finish, a deep voice interrupted. What the hell is going on here? Everyone turned. Standing near the entrance, looking furious, was Vanessa's ex-husband, Daniel. Vanessa's entire body went rigid. What are you doing here? Daniel strode toward the stage, his eyes locking onto her like a sniper. My friend owns this venue. He called me when a certain someone started running up a massive tab with no visible way to pay. The room fell into stunned silence. Vanessa's hands curled into fists. I don't have time for this, Daniel. He let out a sharp laugh. No, you never had time for anything but yourself. He turned to Delilah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think everyone here deserves to know exactly what kind of person Vanessa is. Vanessa's jaw clenched. Don't you dare. Daniel ignored her. Vanessa has spent years living off other people's money. Mine, our parents, anyone who'd let her. She doesn't contribute. She takes. And the second someone stops letting her leech off them, She turns nasty. A ripple of whispers swept through the crowd. A few people exchanged awkward glances. Vanessa's voice wavered. Daniel, stop. He didn't. She spent our entire marriage acting like she was above me. Above everyone. And now she's sitting here trying to humiliate Reed while making him pay for everything. He scoffed. Sounds about right. Vanessa looked murderous. You don't know what you're talking about. Daniel smirked. Don't I? And then the security guards walked in. Excuse me, ma'am, one of them said. We've been informed there's an issue with the bill. Vanessa let out a strangled noise. This is a mistake. The guards didn't care. Would you like to handle this discreetly? Or should we call the authorities? Silence. Cold, perfect, humiliating silence. Vanessa looked around, desperate for someone to step in. But no one did. Not even Delilah. Not even Blair. And especially not me. Vanessa stood there, frozen, her face a shade paler than the overpriced champagne she had been guzzling all night. The weight of the silence pressing down on her was almost beautiful. I just need to step outside, she stammered, gripping the edge of the table as if it could save her from drowning. The guests had gone dead silent, their eyes darting between her and the growing spectacle like it was the most delicious drama they had ever witnessed. The lead security guard crossed his arms. Not an option, ma'am. Management requires immediate payment. I don't have my card with me. She tried again, voice quivering. It must be in my other purse. Daniel scoffed. Cut the act, Vanessa. You pulled this same stunt when we were married. Running up tabs you had no intention of paying, expecting someone else to clean up the mess. Well, guess what? No one's coming to save you this time. Her eyes snapped toward him, full of venom. Why are you even here? He smirked. Oh, you haven't figured it out yet? You're finally getting what you deserve, and I wouldn't miss this show for anything. I leaned in slightly, enjoying every moment. So, Vanessa, what's the plan? You gonna charm your way out of this one? Maybe tell them you're some VIP, and they should just let it slide. Vanessa's breathing grew shallow, her hands clenching at her sides. She turned to Delilah, her last, desperate lifeline. Mom, please. You're really going to let them do this to me? Delilah, to her credit, looked exhausted, not embarrassed, not furious, just tired. The kind of tired that builds up over years of dealing with someone's nonsense. She slowly set down her drink, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist before meeting Vanessa's gaze. Vanessa, she said, voice even. You did this to yourself. Vanessa visibly flinched. I am your daughter, she hissed, voice cracking under the weight of the moment. Delilah nodded, unbothered. And Reed is my son-in-law. Yet you treated him like an outsider while spending his money. I've spent too many years making excuses for you. But this... She gestured around the room. This is the last straw. Vanessa opened and closed her mouth, no words coming out. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. No manipulation, no grand performance, no one left to save her. And then the police walked in. The murmurs in the crowd exploded into full-blown whispers. Phones discreetly lifted to record what was about to happen. The lead officer, a tall, no-nonsense man with sharp eyes, stepped forward. We received a report about an unpaid balance. Normally, we wouldn't intervene this quickly, but given the amount and the nature of the situation, the establishment requested immediate action. Vanessa's breath hitched. You called the police on me, she whispered, her wide, disbelieving eyes locked onto me. I shrugged. Nope, but apparently, when someone racks up a bill this high and refuses to pay, the venue has policies. Daniel chuckled. Wow, Vanessa, you really outdid yourself this time. She spun toward him, her mask of control completely gone. Enough, Daniel. You have no right to be here. He tilted his head, amused. Oh, I have every right to be here. I've waited years to see you finally get what you deserve. Ma'am, the officer interrupted, not interested in their feud. Either you settle this bill now, or we'll have to bring you in for fraud. The crowd gasped. Someone audibly said, Oh, damn. Vanessa staggered back a step. Fraud? It's a dinner bill, not a crime. The officer pulled out his notepad. Ordering high-end items under someone else's name without their consent? That's called defrauding an establishment. Vanessa turned to Delilah, pure panic creeping into her voice. Mom, please. Delilah exhaled slowly. You heard the officer. Pay the bill. Vanessa looked at Blair next, desperate now. You're really siding with him over me? Blair's jaw tightened. He's my husband. And more importantly, he's a better person than you've ever been. And just like that, Vanessa's entire world cracked. I could see it in her eyes. The realization that she had pushed too far. That she had finally burned the one bridge she thought would always be there. She turned back to me, voice barely a whisper. You set me up. I smiled. No, Vanessa. You did. The officer took a step closer. Final chance. Are you paying this bill, or are we escorting you out? Her lip trembled. For the first time ever, she had no clever response. No smug comeback. Nothing. And then, she did the only thing left to do. She ran. Her heels clicked against the marble floors as she bolted toward the exit, shoving past stunned guests. A few people actually laughed. Someone took a picture. Daniel just shook his head. Pathetic. The officers exchanged looks. Do we chase her? The venue manager sighed. No need. We have all her information on file. I let out a slow breath, finally allowing myself to relax. The storm had passed. Vanessa was gone. And for the first time in years, I finally felt like I belonged. The wreckage Vanessa left behind wasn't something that could be cleaned up with a few polite apologies or a hasty retreat. The moment she bolted out of that venue, the dam finally burst. The guests, silent for so long, erupted into murmurs, whispers, and stifled laughter. Phones were still out. Some people scrolling through the chaos they had just recorded. Others already typing up messages that would spread the scandal far beyond this room. Blair sighed beside me, rubbing her temples. Well, that was a disaster. Delilah let out a tired breath. No, darling. That was long overdue. I turned to my mother-in-law, still feeling the tension thrumming in my chest. Delilah, She held up a hand. Don't you dare apologize, Reed. I blinked. You did nothing wrong, she said firmly, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. Vanessa did this to herself. And quite frankly, I'm tired of cleaning up her messes. I glanced at Blair, expecting her to look conflicted or maybe even upset. But instead, she just looked relieved. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it. Reed, I'm so sorry. I frowned. For what? She exhaled. For not standing up to her sooner. For letting her get away with treating you like garbage for years. I should have done something a long time ago. I shook my head. Blair, it's not on you. Vanessa's a grown woman. This was always going to happen. Delilah crossed her arms, nodding in agreement. She needed this wake-up call. And honestly, she let out a short laugh. I doubt she'll actually wake up. She'll just find someone else to blame. Daniel scoffed. You can bet on that. I turned to him, still processing the fact that he had shown up out of nowhere to expose Vanessa in front of everyone. Why did you come anyway? Daniel shrugged. Like I said, my buddy owns this place. When he told me some woman was racking up a massive bill under someone else's name, I knew it had to be her. Blair rubbed her face. Jesus. It's like she's allergic to taking responsibility. She always has been, Delilah said flatly. And for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen before, real exhaustion in her eyes. Not the kind that comes from a long night, but the kind that builds up over years, decades. Vanessa had drained her too. She just never wanted to admit it. The next morning, the fallout officially began. It started with the phone calls. First, Vanessa tried calling Delilah. 7 times. Then she tried Blair. Then, to my complete shock, she even tried me. No one answered. Then came the texts. From Vanessa, you've ruined my life. From Vanessa again. You think you're so smart. You just turned the whole family against me. From Vanessa, 2 hours later. I hope you're happy. I was. But it got worse. By noon, social media was already eating her alive. Someone had recorded the entire scene at the banquet. The moment the police showed up, the bill being presented, The way Vanessa turned tail and ran like a guilty criminal. By the afternoon, it was everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. Rich lady tries to dine and dash at her own mother's birthday party. Woman humiliated after getting caught in $22,000 restaurant scam. When you think you're the main character, but karma has other plans. It was brutal, and I loved it. By the time dinner rolled around, the final nail in Vanessa's coffin dropped. Daniel texted Blair. She got fired. I actually laughed out loud. Wait, what? Blair stared at her phone in shock. Daniel says someone at her company saw the video. They called her in this morning and basically told her she was a PR nightmare. Delilah just sipped her tea. Good. And that's when I realized Vanessa was done. Not just embarrassed. Not just humiliated. Her whole life was unraveling. No job. No support. And for the first time, no family left to bail her out. And she had no one to blame but herself. Vanessa had always believed she was untouchable, that no matter how badly she behaved, someone, whether it was Delilah, Blair, or even an ex-husband, would always be there to pick up the pieces. But now she was completely alone. No job, no husband, no support, and most importantly, no control. And that's when she did the one thing I actually expected. She showed up at my house. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:42 p.m. I already knew it was her before I even checked the camera feed. Blair stood beside me, arms crossed. Are we seriously doing this? I smirked. Might as well. Let's see how desperate she really is. I opened the door, and there she was. Vanessa, looking nothing like her usual, polished, perfectly put together self. Her hair was unbrushed, her makeup smudged, and her eyes were red, like she'd been crying for hours. She didn't wait for an invitation. She shoved past me, storming into the living room like she still owned every room she walked into. What did you do to me? She spat, her voice shaking. I shut the door slowly, leaning against it. I don't know, Vanessa. What did you do to yourself? She whirled around, eyes blazing. You humiliated me. You set me up like some criminal. Blair let out a cold laugh. Vanessa, you scammed a restaurant out of $22,000, and you thought that would just go away. Vanessa turned to her sister, looking betrayed. Oh, don't act like you're innocent in this. You turned on me too. Blair's expression hardened. No, I just finally saw you for who you really are. Vanessa scoffed, but there was a tremble in her hands. You think this is funny, don't you? Watching me lose everything. I tilted my head. You mean the job you got by pretending to be someone you're not? The respect you never actually earned? The family you treated like servants? She swallowed hard, looking away. And then, finally, the truth slipped out. I don't know who I am without this family. Blair exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Vanessa, that's the problem. Vanessa stood in my living room like a cornered animal, her eyes darting between me and Blair. The carefully constructed image she had spent years perfecting had been torn apart, and now, for the first time, she looked small, vulnerable, powerless. I just need to fix this, she whispered, her voice raw. Blair folded her arms. Fix what, Vanessa? Your reputation? Your job? Or the fact that no one trusts you anymore? Vanessa flinched at that, her hands trembling. I can fix it. I need help. I let out a slow exhale, shaking my head. Vanessa, the only thing you've ever needed help with is learning how to take responsibility. And we both know you don't do that. Her jaw clenched. That's not fair. Oh, it's fair, Blair cut in. Reed's put up with years of your bullshit. We all have. And now that you finally hit rock bottom, you expect us to pick up the pieces? That's not how this works. Vanessa blinked rapidly, her mask slipping further. I thought no matter what, I'd always have my family. Blair exhaled sharply. You did. And you lost us. Silence settled over the room. A suffocating kind of silence. Vanessa's lip trembled, and for a second, just a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally going to admit everything. Apologize. Show even a shred of real remorse. Instead, her face hardened. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I sighed. Vanessa. Watching me fall apart, watching me lose everything? You think you've won. Her voice was rising now, desperate, angry. I won't stay down. You hear me? I'll bounce back. I always do. Blair shook her head. That's the problem, Vanessa. You never learn. You just move on to the next person who will tolerate you. But not this time. You burned every bridge. Vanessa's breath hitched. Blair, get out. For the first time in her life, Vanessa had nowhere left to go. She swallowed hard, eyes bouncing between us, as if willing one of us to take pity on her. But we didn't. With a sharp inhale, she turned and stormed out the front door without another word. Blair closed her eyes, exhaling before looking at me. It's over. I nodded. Yeah, it is. 1 year later. A lot changed after that night. Blair and I grew closer, without Vanessa constantly stirring the pot. It felt like we could breathe again. Delilah stopped enabling her, finally allowing herself to let go of the toxic cycle Vanessa had dragged her through for years. And Vanessa, well, she tried to rebuild. She got a new job, but it wasn't glamorous. No power, no control, just work. She never reached out. Not to me, not to Blair, not even to Delilah. And honestly, that was fine. Because if I learned anything from this entire mess, it's that family isn't about blood. It's about who actually respects you. And Vanessa, she was never my family. She just thought she was the main character in a story that didn't belong to her.